Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Swenk.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I want to just share a quick, I just want to tee it up a little bit, why I'm so excited to pick your brain.
Because of Sasquatch?
Because of Sasquatch, mostly. Yeah. But for everybody listening, if you're in the agency space, you've heard of Jason. And that's why, it's cool. If you're not in the agency space, you maybe haven't. But it's interesting, those that, listen know that I happen to also own a digital agency. And, your name is sort of synonymous with agency growth, agency exits, agency scalability, work-life balance. I mean, all these great things that I just can't wait to pick your brain about. But it's funny because, I've been paying attention to you and watching your content and consuming your messaging for a very long time. And until very recently did I realize not only did we live in the same town, but we're literally neighbors.
Yeah, on the same ridge.
So I'm like, I'm going to leverage that. I'm going to use it to my advantage, twist some arms a little bit and see if I can't get Jason here to pick his brain.
Your sister-in-law works with one of my best friends that's the reason I moved here.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And that's how it all came about is that she was sending us a YouTube video, which I don't know if we'll go down that path or not today, but I was like, get out of town. Jason Swenk, he lives, that's who that is. So anyway, it's awesome to hear, but
the casino on the hill. Right.
Yeah. But, yeah. And now though, you're the owner and founder of Agency Mastery 360 and the Agency Playbook. You also are the host of the Smart Agency Masterclass podcast, which I believe is still the #1 digital agency podcast that's out there.
Been doing it for 10 years.
So cool.
Haven't missed a week yet.
Podcasting before podcasting was cool. Have you really not missed a single week?
No.
Really?
No.
In 10 years?
10 years. And we do twice a week. Ever since COVID, we started doing twice a week.
Yeah.
And then before then, because probably the first 10 episodes weren't a podcast, they were a Google Hangout. And then one of my friends go, you should create a podcast. And all I knew about podcasting was I would watch it on the computer. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. And then he explained what a podcast was. I was like, oh, I could do that. And I did it. And I never looked back.
It's so cool. It's interesting, and this is where I'm so excited to pick your brain, but I would imagine that there's some characteristics, that contribute to pulling off a podcast every week for 10 years. I'm on I believe this is week 67. So I'm at, a year and a half or whatever.
You're the 1% of all podcasters.
Welcome to it,
Right? Like, I think there was a stat, like, most people don't make it past 1.
Right.
And then like 99% of people don't make it past 10.
Right. Yep. So it's funny. I actually just recently did a presentation. It's on the power of endurance. I told you this on the phone, but I'm an endurance athlete. And so I had the presentation was basically how we can take lessons learned through running endurance and apply them to life and business and whatever. And I use that podcast stat as a metric for it, that all you have to do is put out, I think it's 11 podcasts, and you're in the top 1% or 10% or whatever it is. But you have to keep doing the thing. But that's crazy that you've stuck with that for 10 years. And I was looking through, obviously I've listened to several episodes, but gosh, the guests that you've had on and the conversations that you've been able to have, so cool.
Yeah. The podcasting lets you talk to people you normally wouldn't, right? Like Seth Godin.
Right.
Or like Gary Vaynerchuk or Guy Kawasaki. Like, they wouldn't talk to me, but I was like, hey, do you want to come on the show? I could promote your book. And they were like, yeah, sure. And then I have like an hour to just like talk with them and pick their brain. I was like, all right. But those are not even the most interesting ones. Like, the ones are the ones you've never heard of.
Right.
Because I've heard their story so many times, and so is everyone else.
Right.
So I'm like, all right.
Yeah, there's a balancing act there, because if you're trying to grow a podcast, you want big names with a following,
Correct.
Like, I'm a little excited that Jason's here today. Obviously, there's these good things, and not to say this won't be a great conversation, but, some of my better conversations I've had, is actually the fire chief at Fort Lewis Mesa Fire Protection, out kind of by where you live. You're just on the border of it. He has zero online presence whatsoever. Yeah. And it was such a great conversation, just sitting to chat with people like that. It's a good point you bring up, that sometimes the best ones are the sleeper episodes.
Oh, big time.
The sleeper guests.
Yeah. And I appreciate what they do. Like, a lot of times because we have a good vantage point, I could see the fires. So I'm constantly, when the fires are happening, I'm like, they're over there.
Yeah, it was a fun one. He was in Special Forces, and now he's the fire chief. It's cool. It's a good one. So, but anyway, like I had mentioned, your name is sort of synonymous in the agency space. So anybody who's an agency owner, knows your story. But there's a lot of people that don't. I would love it if you didn't mind, painting a little bit of that picture and giving a little bit of the background of, what brought you to good old Durango, Colorado.
Yeah, well, I graduated from Florida State, which our football team is horrendous.
They're doing great this year.
They're it's good as Fort Lewis,
Yeah.
I guess, right? 1-9 right now.
Right.
But when I graduated, I worked for Arthur Andersen, and I hated it. And so I was a computer programmer, but the challenge was, in school, I outsourced all my work. So I didn't know how to do computer programming. And at the same time, when they started to figure out I didn't know how to program, I did know how to design websites. And so I was designing a website, making fun of one of my friends that looked like Justin Timberlake from NSYNC. And so I called it In Shit, and it got widely popular. It was like when we had GeoCity URLs, and people were like emailing the link, and people just started asking me to design websites for them. And I remember my first website, I charged $500. It was for Charlie Commander. I remember the website too. I need to go to it. It was like C21 Home, I think. I can't. And so I was off to the races. So as an accidental agency owner, I knew how to do something cool. Someone offered me money. And then, over the years, I started hiring more people. And we got big. We started working with clients like AT&T and Aflac and Lotus Cars. And then I guess 12 years later, someone came with a pretty big check and was like, we want to buy you. I was like, sure. And then I was depressed. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I was kind of bored, went to a Tony Robbins event, walked on fire, thought it was fake. And when people got burned.
It was not fake.
Well, when people got burned a couple of years on the news, right? You remember that? It was like in the news.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it was real. And then around that same time, my old competitors were like, hey, how'd you beat the crap out of us? How'd you do this? And I was like, well, I just did it this way. And here's what worked for me. And this is what we did. And I just loved it. And then that's when I started the podcast.
So cool.
Yeah.
Tell me, so just to clarify timeline on that, first website, that $500 project.
$99.
$99.
And then I sold in October of 2011.
Okay, cool. So 12 years from, obviously $500 to,
to $1 million
10 figures.
websites.
Yeah, so cool. I want to hear what that was like, because you refer to yourself as an accidental agency owner. Yeah. And because I think a lot of business owners, agency or otherwise, there's sort of two groups, generally speaking, of entrepreneurs. There's your I'm just going to do this thing, and the hope and a prayer, which I fall probably into that bucket for sure. I'm an emotional, energy driven guy. Let's just send it and see how it goes. Yeah. And then there's your, write the business plan. Here's our growth strategy. Here's how it's all going to go. I'm fascinated because so many people go into entrepreneurship with. If there were a case study on kind of the dream of how it would look, you'd be a chapter in it at least, if not, a half of the book. But I want to know what that felt like when you started to experience the real growth early on, accidental agency owner, and now all of a sudden you're starting to scale, and walk me through the emotional state and what did life feel like at that chapter?
I mean, it was ups and downs. I mean, it's not sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, right? So there was many times I wanted to quit and throw in the towel. I mean, I remember one year. So in the very beginning, we were doing $500 websites, or just me. I don't know why I'm saying we. It was just moi.
Have to look bigger than you were,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's always we.
And the first office space we ever got, it was maybe like this, about 3,000 square foot. And then the landlord gave us cubes, and they were the ugliest cubes, like this nasty cube. So we set all these cubes up, and then we started putting pictures all on the desks, like fake pictures, right, to make it look like. And then anytime we would have clients, this would when clients would come to your office, They would come. We would always have them over at lunchtime and be like, "Oh yeah, everybody's at lunch."
Right. Yeah, everyone's
Just
busy.
to look bigger, like it was me and my business partner at that time.
I love that.
So in the very beginning, it was fun. Like you're kind of in this fun stage, right? Like especially coming out of school. I was making, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a website. I could do like 2 a week. I was like, this is
good
more money
money
than I ever knew what to do with. And then I get to a point where I was like, I want to scale it. I want to take it up a notch. And so I started hiring people, and we got to about 2 million in revenue, and I hated it. I literally was like, fuck this shit. I'm going to close. And my wife even, I remember her going to me, she goes, why don't you just go get a job, just close it down. So I took an interview for the CMO of NASCAR, and I used to race cars at the time. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is like right up my alley.
The dream gig, kind of, yeah.
And they asked me 2 questions, and they go, what do you want to do all day long? And what do you never want to do that you're doing currently? And I couldn't answer in the interview. And so I went back home and I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I don't like project management. I don't like account management. I don't like sales. Like I was like everything that I was doing. And literally, but that kind of turned in my plan, and it gave me clarity for what I wanted. And so what I loved doing was I loved being the face of the organization. I loved adding color to sales. I loved coaching my leadership team. I loved building relationships, and I loved understanding the top KPIs that we're going after. And so that kind of turned into, as soon as I had that clarity, I was like, all right, now I can transform from an owner to a CEO. And I'm just going to focus on this. And I'm going to hire people to do all the other stuff, the project management, the account management, the strategy, all this other stuff. I'm just going to say no to it. And it took me about 6 months to get there. And then the company started growing very fast. And then that's when we were able to get to, over 8 figures and so on and grow. But, I had to get that clarity, and then I had to get that confidence in order to, kind of go execute. So I didn't have to take the job.
Right. I was just going to ask what, because I definitely understand that clarity, and like, what a cool, exercise to sort of have to reflect on like, what do you like and what do you not like? What a great interview question, actually, even, by the way. But I'm curious because, a lot of people feel that when their businesses are growing and they're kind of got that like, I don't know, you're wearing 10 different hats and you're stressed out. I've had many of times when I've been like, I don't know if this was worth it.
We all still do. Like,
Yeah.
I know the exercise, and I still have to remind myself. I'm like, why am I doing that? Why did I write my ad?
Right.
Just hire someone, dummy.
Yeah. But what, at that moment, what made you kind of reflect back and decide to make those changes in your agency as opposed to seek them elsewhere, like in a job setting? Like how come you pivoted from that?
I felt getting a job was the ultimate defeat. And I was giving up. That's why I've been fired from every single job I've ever had. Some summers I got fired from 3 jobs.
Right.
And I'll contribute that to I won't quit. I have to make other people to make me. They have to quit for me.
Right.
To do it. So I was like, I'm not going to quit. Like, I can figure this out. And plus, I'm going to be the worst employee for this company. Like, I'd take them down.
Yeah. Right.
And at the time, I liked NASCAR. So I was like, I better not do that.
This isn't going to, I can't burn that bridge.
That's right.
Right.
So, yeah, there's really no other plan. It was kind of like, some people say, like, you want to take the island, burn the boat? You have
I like that. No plan
other
B.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I relate to that a ton too. Cause for a lot of business owners, but at least myself specifically, it's like, gosh, if this didn't work, first of all, the hit to the ego would be, a devastating blow that I'm not sure I could recover from. But also, what else do we know?
Well, and I failed at a lot of other businesses, even, before then, like, we had a company that we called My Town, and it did everything MySpace did 2 years before that.
No way.
We did, we wrote our own content management software before there was content management software.
Right.
And we would install it on every instance rather than SaaS. Did the same thing with the e-commerce store, email marketing software. So I've failed so many times. But I've also succeeded, through a lot of the other things. But
Yeah.
I've always learned from those failures.
Do you think that's what's been the biggest contributor to your agency success has been the learning opportunities from those other failures, or what do you think the variable is there? Why do you think the agencies have worked? And I say agencies plural, by the way, because I know you definitely at least have one
another
right
one.
now, and I thought there was maybe something in between with
Yep.
some acquisitions or something.
Yes.
But anyway, the agency space clearly has,
Short-term memory is probably the secret. Like, I just forget about it. Right? Like, it's like I grew up playing tennis, and I played in college, and now I will be on the pickleball courts in Durango all the time. Like, I'm addicted.
Can you believe how busy those are?
Oh, I take them all down.
Wild.
I love it. And I'm addicted to it, but it's kind of like I hit a bad shot, and most people will dwell on it. I'll be like,
On to the next.
I'm on to the next point, right? Like Roger Federer, one of the best tennis players ever, he's only won 48% of the points when he plays. 48% of the points. It's about winning the right points and forgetting the ones that you mess up.
Tell me more about that. What does that mean as it relates to agencies?
Well, I mean, you're going to fail every single day, all day long. But if you dwell on it, you're just going to keep focusing right on that particular thing. So for example, if I come in and going, this quarter sucks. And this quarter probably does suck for a lot of people, especially election year. Some people are celebrating, some people are not, right? And they think that matters. And they can say, oh, I'm not getting all the leads. I don't have the at-bats. Like, well, why don't you just build for the next at-bat and just forget about that? Because if you focus on it, like when I would teach people how to race a car, the biggest thing is when we go into a spin, they're going to look at the thing they don't want to hit. They're going to be like, if I don't want to hit this B right here, they're going to just keep focusing on it. And what are you going to do? You're going to steer into it. But if I want to go over here, I'm going to focus here, right? So people just keep focusing on the negative.
Love that. Yeah, I've been saying forever that, what we pay attention to gets magnified. And so we have to choose accordingly. And, that's been an interesting thing. I learned the concept of short-term memory in football. I played high school football, and then I actually came and played at Fort Lewis. And believe it or not, when I played, we won it sometimes. And
they had the longest win streak.
Shout out to the Skyhawks. They did win 3 games this year.
They did. Three. Better than Florida State.
Best in a very long time. They at the time, though, this year at one point, we had the longest losing streak in all of collegiate football.
It was on ESPN.
All levels. Yeah, 40-game losing streak. But and then when they won Rush the Field, it was epic. But
anyway, 10 fans?
Right, yeah. But anyway, but I learned that concept of short-term memory. But I think it goes beyond that, too, even to also even just like an optimistic perspective. Like one of the things that has helped me overcome the highs and the lows of, agency ownership has been an abundance mindset of like, you know what, there's another one. And there's 10 more of them.
I didn't have that when I ran the first agency. I wanted to search and destroy.
Right.
Anybody that owned an agency, I wanted to just take you out at the knees. And I didn't realize that until after I started to chat with my old competitors. I was like, man, we should have got together and talked
and collaborated, yeah.
And really just shared ideas because of the abundance. And especially that's what I see like in our mastermind now of like these I wouldn't have let myself in my own mastermind back then because I wanted to search and destroy.
Right.
Like I didn't want to share. I just wanted to take. And that's the wrong mindset.
When did that change?
After I sold.
Interesting.
When I actually started talking to my old competitors, and I was like, they're not competitors anymore, so let me share.
Right.
And then, then they were sharing back to me. I was like, oh man, I wish I did that. And then we were just going, we're like, man, we should have got together more and that kind of stuff. And we were kind of old school, right? And it was right when digital was starting to take big.
I entered the digital space in 2009. Mm-hmm. So, you were seasoned you had, 10 years of experience by the time I had started in the digital space. And I've got, two perspectives. One is I worked for 10 years for a media-backed agency.
Okay.
And when I started there, I actually got hired. It was early on in the digital space when people were trying to create their own platforms. So we were Buzztown,
Okay.
and we were selling Buzztown, and these like platforms with a little bit of content management systems and some photos and place to write reviews and this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think we were selling it for like $300 a month, or it might have been $200 a month actually. And and then it evolved, but it was a really cool learning experience for me to kind of climb the corporate ladder. Learned a lot, met a lot of great people, learned a lot about what not to do too. And then, now I've got the experience from my independent agency and that space too. And just kind of interesting in the two different worlds and kind of how they collide. And that's what I think is so interesting about the agency mastery concept, is that idea of how powerful collaboration can be with essentially competitors.
Oh, big time.
It's a borderless market.
Yeah.
I've got clients all over the country. You've got clients all over the country. They've got clients all over the country. Talk to me about that, the value in collaboration, and I think I'm especially interested in it. Leadership, entrepreneurship, whatever it might be, there's a tendency for it to be lonely. Like I joke often that I don't have an advisory board, doing the best I can with the information I have. And, from an outside perspective, to think about essentially competitors collaborating and all of that on the surface level sounds a little bit crazy. Yeah. Walk me through it.
Oh, I totally get it. Right. And I wouldn't have changed my mind until I saw it. Like 2 weeks ago, I went, especially we're getting toward the end of the year. And our mastermind meetings are kind of theme based, and I like to ask a lot of questions and get everybody to participate. And I asked them, I said, look, I want everybody to go to their team later on today, and just the ones that direct report to you. And I want you to ask them, what do they want you to start, stop, and continue doing for next year based on this year? And so, like if I was just coaching you and one agency at a time, you'd be like, okay, go do it. That's a great exercise. One of the members goes, why don't we do this with our clients? And then it took us down a whole nother rabbit hole, right? And so, and a lot of times too, when I used to coach agencies, I would come into some of the meetings around like month 5, right? And they're kind of busy, and I'd ask them a question. What's going on, Ben? Like, you need anything? Oh, I'm actually kind of good. And sometimes they are, but there's things in the background that you're not aware of, that you have issues with, that you need to fix, that another member or another person in your mastermind. That's why I always think everyone should join a mastermind, regardless if it's mine or whoever's. But if you can hear someone else going, hey, I have this challenge, you'd be like, man, I have that challenge too. Or another thing I see it happen a lot of times when you're in like an advisory meeting, you can give advice. I'll give advice to you, and this happens to me all the time. I'll call my team up right after, be like, Darby, man, Stacy, we're not doing it. I gave this great advice we used to do. We haven't done it in 2 years. And then we start to go do it
It's
again.
like accountability partners.
It is.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times, too, it's therapy. Like you said, it's lonely. Like we have some mastermind members that have been in for 6 years, and like they hardly ever ask any questions, but they just want to show up. And they want to feel that they're heard. Because I've joined other organizations outside of, and all I know is agency world. Like I've joined, tons of groups where it has like lawyers and accountants and everybody, and they just don't get us.
Right.
And I was like, I just wanted to create a group that got me. And so, yeah, it's just I've been able to create something I wish I had. And I'm still looking for my own mastermind.
Right.
Right? Like if any of you know a mastermind for me, let me know.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll start one. There's a business opportunity for somebody. No, I'm just kidding. But so, cause, and it's cool because you've got an interesting perspective because one, you've lived it, but then two, you get to interact with so many different, agency owners. And I know you get hit up all the time and all of these things. I'm curious in terms of things that have held back agency owners. From your perspective, what would you say is the biggest thing that has held back agencies from growing, or from the owners of, it turning into what they want it to?
I really think it's around clarity. They were accidental, especially in the service-based business, right? You knew how to do something cool. Someone offered you money. You started doing that, and then you're just reacting to the market versus really kind of stepping back. Like I tell agency owners or any service-based businesses, I'm like, I want you to think of this. If you're only going to be paid on performance only, what would you do, and who would you do it for? Right? And if you really thought about it, probably 50% of your clients right now, you probably like, oh shit, I got to get rid of them. Right? They just don't match. Like I just got off an interview a little while ago. I was interviewing an agency that was around the 25 million mark. And he said, we ask 3 questions to ourselves before we take on a client. Like, are they established? And this was his, I'm trying to remember him now. Like, are they established? Can we make a difference in something else? Like, do they believe in some values we have?
And that was sort of their qualifying questions for themselves.
Correct.
To see if they're a good fit for them,
exactly.
not the vice versa.
Because like when you're
clarity,
people are interviewing you, but you should be interviewing them as well. But if I can go into a meeting, like last week I was on a podcast interview. I interviewed someone, and they were kind of really full of themselves. And all the people that I want to surround myself with are humble. Like, you would never know that they had any money. You would never know what they've done. They just want to have a good time, help out, that kind of stuff, right? And those are the people I appreciate the most.
Right.
Like the ones that are flashy and showing off. This person was very flashy. And they were like, well, tell me more about the mastermind. Well, the mastermind's amazing, but it's full. And I was like, I don't know if you would be the best fit for it either. And he was like, what? And it's kind of funny when you do that. They want you more. I'm
right.
Like, honestly, no. Like, you come in bragging too much. Like, the core values are not there.
We're not aligned. Yeah.
And so when you have that clarity of who your perfect clients are and where you actually want to go, and then you share that vision with your team, then that gives you way more freedom. Like, my team can call me on my shit. Like a couple years ago, we were writing a blog post interview of, it's the typical SEO stuff, right? Like, what are the top 20 conferences for agency owners to go to? And my team put it together. I looked at the list, and I go, these 3 take off. Why? They're assholes. My team's like, Jason, is it because they didn't ask you to speak there? And I said, yes.
Are they actually assholes?
Yeah. Well, they're assholes for that, right? That's my thinking.
Hey, it's us and the assholes,
Exactly. I was like, I am a cool guy. You should have invited me. And they were like, well, let me ask you a question. Is the conference good for agency owners? I said, yes. Put it back on. Because our North Star is to create a resource I wish I had. So that's how we make all decisions. And that's how I gave them the power to make all decisions. So they're constantly coming to me to go, hey, we're normally solving, or, like a couple of years ago, all of our mastermind is all over $1 million in revenue. And they go, well, what about the smaller agencies? Can we create like an incubator for them? And they came up with that idea. I was like, let's go execute it. And we did, right? Now, I didn't have to do anything other than share the vision of where I'm going.
Right.
Which gives me way more freedom than I've ever had ever before.
Right. Yeah. So it's almost like, because you're not getting hung up on the small stuff you've already dealt with by creating that clarity, as you worded it, the North Star, the direction, that those decisions are almost baked in. Like, you don't have to make those decisions if they're not aligned with the vision and the direction and things like that, which then opens up energy and opportunity to pursue things that are aligned with that North Star. I love that. Yeah. What would be your response to the agency owner that's going, well, yeah, but Jason, we need the money. We're growing right now, or maybe this one could be different. What's your response to the guy listening right now they're in build mode and need every client they can get?
Then you got to look at, there's a lot more to unpack there if they're going, I need the money for it. Because now you're making a decision based on money, and that's never a good. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is Moneyball, right? Like, Billy Bean story of the general manager of the A's, and I'm kind of the same way, right? Like, when I made a lot of decisions, and I would always hear people, they would always go, "Oh, don't make a decision based on money." I'm like, well, that's real fucking easy for you because you got fucking money.
Yeah, easy to say.
And it's true, though, because when I sold the agency and that was true, then I started going, well, man, I'm taking money out of the equation.
Right.
And then you actually make better decisions.
And then more money comes.
More money comes.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's interesting. So we do a Motivation Monday post every Monday at Ascent, and we've started doing a new thing where the team members are filming themselves, and we're talking about a quote that's motivating.
How long did that take?
Yeah, and I did mine today actually, and mine coincidentally was a Mitch Albom quote from Tuesdays with Maury about people chasing the wrong things. Whether you're chasing money or whatever it might be, instead of chasing a community and fulfillment. And it's wild because I've seen in my life time and time again, because I go through chapters just like just like everybody else in the whole world, where sometimes I'm chasing money and sometimes I'm chasing the right things. Yeah. And what I found without exception is when I'm chasing the right things, the money comes. And it's interesting because it happens in different ways than you would think. A lot of it, what I think is that you don't have the opportunity costs involved with doing the wrong things.
That's right.
You're not tied up. You're open to opportunity that comes. I've got clarity to think and whatever. Like one of the most impactful decisions I made is I started scheduling in my workout times at Ascent. So they're on the calendar every day from 10 to noon. That's when I'm going to exercise, and it's a non-negotiable. It's literally on my calendar. And early on when I started the company, I was grinding.
Forever.
Like grinding. I mean, 60-hour weeks, 5-6 meetings a day. I mean, I was working, and I was enjoying it. I was excited. It was new, it was fun, but I was not sustaining my, anything other than that. And I started doing that, and I'm energized in the afternoons more than I ever have been. And I find that I have think time. So when I'm running, I get to solve problems and think through stuff about the business and ideas. And sometimes I'll solve a problem with my agency. Sometimes I'll solve a problem for a client. Sometimes I'll have a creative, whatever it is. But that's one example of many of where I love that idea of, paying attention to what we're pursuing and not making a decision just based on money. Because if you're taking the wrong client, it's a lesson I've learned the hard way. And it took, and you'll get to know me better, but I'm not the type of guy that learns a lesson once. I got to learn it 6 times.
I think we all are. On some things,
because I've made that mistake a dozen times probably, and where I make that mistake is I go, well, this one might be different. I got red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, and I'm like, well, but maybe this one will go the way it should, whatever. 6 months later, after we've poured who knows how much time and energy and resources into it, and they're going to leave anyway. Imagine the energy that could have freed up. So anyway, that's a great insight.
Well, I mean, and two, people when they plan a goal, right? It's based on money.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like this year is the first year that we've done this where we don't have a revenue goal, but we have a goal for our clients.
Love that.
And because if we're able to achieve that for our clients, our members, well, we'll probably hit that.
Right.
Right. And that's what it's looking to be. And the other thing too is a lot of times when people pick 90-day goals, they go, oh, I want to make this in 90 days. And I'm like, well, that's fine. You can do that. But your first goal should be a time goal. Going back to what you were saying, time block, from 10 to 12, is running, and I'm always going to do it. And that's what we do as well, right? I time block my calendar where I normally don't do any meetings on Monday, but I
except for really important podcasts.
Really important podcast. This is a Monday, so I broke my rule. But Tuesdays through Thursdays from 9 to 2 is the only time I put any meetings on. Fridays are for Epic Fridays, where we go climb a mountain or do something really cool, or pickleball now. And then, Saturdays and Sundays are for family. And then Mondays kind of to get going a little bit. And then hit it hard again
onto
over
it.
3 days.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been an interesting one that I've had to learn the hard way as well. But, you know, I term it optimizing for sustainability. But, you know, the goal is to continue to play the game, you know, not to win the game.
That's it. So I heard something. You know who Charles Barkley is, right? He's my favorite.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, small basketball player, but he's my favorite commentator because he just talks like you know he just says what he is. But I remember when he started playing for the 76ers, and he came out of Auburn, and he was kind of fat and slow. And he went to, I remember he was telling the story, and he was talking to, I think it was Moses Malone. And he goes, dude, like, I'm not playing much. He's like, well, you're fat and lazy. And he goes, well, can you help me? He's like, well, let's lose 10 pounds this week, and then you come back, and we'll see how you do. And so he lost 10 pounds. He got a little bit more playing time because he was a little faster. He's like, all right, well, lose 10 more pounds. They did it for, I think, 6 weeks in a row. And he lost 60 pounds. And one of the weeks he felt a little bit more tired. And Moses said, well, we found your fighting weight, gained 10 pounds. And then that's what he continued on. And so I'm telling you that story because it goes back to kind of your optimizing. We all have to find, like, I don't want anybody to copy my,
right, like
my
the
calendar.
Yeah.
Oh, just Tuesdays through Thursdays, 9 to 2, and that'll work. You have to kind of work a shitload, and you got to find your fighting weight. Like and it took me 20 years to find this time blocking thing. A lot of times I would be bored, so now I need to work more, or I wasn't fulfilled, or if I was exhausted, and I needed to kind of find that. And that if you're aware of it, then you can go, okay, like 40 hours is mine. Or like, if you're an Alex Hermosi, which is he just loves the work, or a Gary Vaynerchuk, all right, work 100 hours a week. Like that's how you escape, and you're optimized for that time blocking. For me, it's more like 20 hours a week.
Right.
Like
right.
I'm good, right?
Right.
And those guys will make fun of me. They'll be like, "Oh, you're just lazy." Like, no, I'm happy.
Yeah. You know, and that's been an interesting, that's been a somewhat of a steep learning curve for me too. That whole idea of being happy. Yep. You know, because I've struggled for a long time with like attaching my value to my, you know, achievements, like there's whatever it is. And it took me years to start to learn that if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't take care of the other things around me, my business, my family, you know, whatever it might be. And until very recently, probably the last year, have I like fully leaned into it and like believed that concept. And it has made all of the difference in the world, to where it's like I'm living the most rich life I've ever lived, with these amazing experiences. I'm spending time with my family, my kids, you know, all this stuff. And my business is growing. Yeah. It's so cool to like learn that balance is possible. I mean, and it's funny too, because, you know, when you talk to somebody who's actually done it versus like the Instagram snippets. Just the other day, I saw this thing on Instagram.
Those guys drive me crazy.
And somebody's saying that, you know, anybody who says balance is a liar. You know, like nobody's ever gotten wealthy with balance or whatever. I'm like, I don't know. I've met a lot of really, in fact, I would almost go so far as to say that most of the highest successful people I get to meet, and I do get to meet many sitting across the table from you, have found balance. And what a cool, like, empowering concept to figure out.
I mean, you got to go back to my favorite movie, Karate Kid, too, or my second favorite movie, right? Found balance.
Moneyball, Karate Kid.
Yeah.
You're you know, aging yourself
80s.
a little bit. Yeah.
And Rad is a very close third.
A little era. Yeah.
If you remember Rad.
It's been great. We've started using the word stoked more here at the office, and it's been an awesome addition to, you know, our normal vocabulary. We'll see if Rad can make it in as well.
Well, yeah. Well, in the 80s. So I'm 47, I think, or 40. Yeah. 46. I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah, in the 80s, Rad was like my favorite BMX movie. And the Crew Jones, the head guy, he lives in Durango. So I've been trying to find someone that knows him so I can be like, hey, let's go out on the BMX bikes.
Right. That would be rad. Yeah. No, it's awesome. Yeah. Do you think, you know, now that you'd mentioned sort of this North Star of building what you wish you had, One of the things I'm curious about, and I already sort of know the answer because you're still in the agency space, obviously. You're not one of those guys that just like, what do they say? Those who can't teach,
Teach,
you know,
yes.
you're doing it and teaching, you know, and connecting the mind. So I want to preface it with that, that, you know, I'm not implying anything like that. But I'm curious from your perspective, because there's quite a bit of change now in availability of information is the way I'll call it, where, you know, there used to be an era where the things that agencies could do, only agencies could do. Now we're in a world where, you know, you go to YouTube and you could learn how to do it, you know, just about anything. Maybe not some of the like demand side platform targeted programmatic, but even that stuff may probably, you know, somebody who had the time. Like most of the things that agencies do, other people could do. So I'm curious your take on the kind of that, knowing that change in how readily available information is now, and if you see a shrinking in demand for agencies, expansion in it, or how that's going to kind of impact, you know, the agency space.
I see a shrinking in the big guys, right? The big agencies. But I see, because the bigger brands can use AI, and it's amazing what you can do with it. I mean, it's every day I'm amazed. Like if you prompt it right, and the bigger brands realize this, but the relationships are there. But a lot of the smart people from the big agencies are going to leave and start little agencies and specialized. There will always be a need for agencies, but they'll be more specialized, right? It's kind of like, think about the car dealership, right? Who started the car dealership? It was the car manufacturer, because they didn't want to do sales, right? But they're the middlemen. That's what agencies are. But what you have to do is you have to position yourself as that trusted advisor, and you have to be resourceful, because the people that use AI or these new tools or all these follow these trends, the brands don't want to, they want to know how it works, but they don't want to do it.
Right.
Right. That's why I always tell every business owner selling anybody, tell everybody exactly what you're going to do, how they can go do it. Don't hold anything back. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I totally have confidence in that. Like when I was selling, we used to sell tons of websites. I would always go, I'm going to tell you my exact process. And I'm going to tell you the exact process of everyone else. And I would say, look, everyone else is going to say, what websites do you like? Do you want to know why they ask that? Well, why? Well, because they want to know what you like. And they're unoriginal for coming up with, you know, what you need. And that's why your whole industry looks the same. We do it a little different. We've had psychiatrists go through our questionnaire that we're going to ask you. So we know exactly what you want without you telling us what you want. And then I'd walk them through the process. By the time they're like, I know exactly how Jason and his agency is going to work.
Right.
I trust you. And then they're going to pair everyone else to me. And I got you.
Right. Yeah, and it's I use the adage that you can share the recipe, the cake still won't taste the same.
Correct. Especially baking at high altitude. My wife hates it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, why is it shrinking?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, because and I think that there's something about it's interesting because it's sort of like how you had mentioned, you know, the guy who wasn't a good fit for the mastermind, all of a sudden they want it more. I think almost the same thing happens too when we're willing to sort of share, you know, the process or ideas or whatever it might be. It increases your credibility significantly and probably builds that demand.
Like you guys do a lot of video here. When I started doing video about 10 years ago, I started watching all the Wistia videos. You remember when they would do like the how-to? They'd be like, get a blue background. I did a green background. My first videos, I looked like an Oompa Loompa because I had the wrong lighting. Like I didn't have a light in the back and light in the front and side.
Right.
But like if I was a video agency, I would be sharing everything, like how someone could shoot their own videos.
You think that even beyond, you know, video, you think that content marketing is going to still be, because I would say It's funny because we're an ad agency, a video agency, marketing. We kind of do it all from a digital perspective, and we try to practice what we preach in terms of lead generation and our growth strategies. So I've done AdWords for myself. I've done retargeted campaign. I mean, you name it. I've built the funnels. You name it. What works is content marketing for me. In my world, and I think a lot of that probably comes from the fact that my personality, like I'm an authentic guy. I have to have some complexity and some nuance for me to get my thought across. So I'm curious though, if you think that idea, if you're a video agency and sharing, the ideas, do you think that content marketing is going to stay as relevant as it is, and that it's an untapped opportunity for agencies to leverage?
Yeah, even more.
Yeah.
But I think people think content marketing is just writing a blog post.
Right.
And that's right. Or an article to get SEO ranking, which that's changing, right? Because who cares about getting like the Google search and all that? It's probably going to change.
Oh, it's got to. Because you think about
like they're going to be asking AI.
The influx of, we've lived in a content saturated world for a decade now, at least. That has, I have no idea the numbers on it, since AI became popular the last 2 years ago, maybe. Yeah. But I've got to imagine the amount of written content that has entered the internet has gone up, but by 1,000 times percent. Who knows how much saturated that is now? Which then I think now there's a bigger opportunity for that authentic content marketing. It's those relationships and connections, like you had mentioned earlier.
It's the personality.
Yeah.
Right. When I started getting into this business, helping agencies, there was maybe two to three other people. All they did was write blog posts. I was like, well, I can't figure out their tone. I can't figure out their personality. I'm going to do video. And that was able to reach a lot of people doing that, because then like I would meet people at a conference and be like, I felt like I know you, right? Like you told me when I walked in the office, you're like, you got to tell me, I flew a drone today or this weekend, and I know you fly planes into your neighbor's house by mistake, right? Like people just feel like they know you from the stories, and I can tell the same thing like with our events, right? Like we had an event in Alamosa by the Great Sand Dunes where one of my friends, he runs a ranch that's like 100,000 acres, and he has 2,000 bison on it.
So cool.
It's pretty cool. And so we rent out the whole ranch, and all the mastermind members come, we ride horses and have conversations. And look, I could tell, and I've seen other people kind of try to replicate what we've done, but people come to me like, it's not the same, right? Because it doesn't have the personalities in it.
Right.
And that's the same thing with the content marketing. I could tell you the secret sauce, but you don't have it.
Right.
Right? It's unique in everybody. Like everybody has to find it. And look, I get why people have to emulate people. I think my first YouTube show was called Ask Swenk Show. It was all Ask Gary V show.
Right.
Like you have to emulate. And like for 1 or 2 episodes, I was like portraying Gary Vaynerchuk.
Trying to do it, yeah.
And then I was like, that's not me, right? Like I just need to be me.
Right.
And then I changed that.
So there's an interesting, and gosh, I could go 10 ways with that. But to finish that thought is I really do think, especially with AI and this, influx, that people are desperate for authentic connections,
big time.
real connections, and they want something real, because we've got so much, fabricated kind of fake stuff now. You had mentioned just earlier there, and it's so interesting because it's something that I've wrestled with, this balancing act, and I'm curious your take on it because of your masterminds and the groups that you run and all of this stuff. There's a fine line, I feel like, in trusting our own intuition, leaning into who we are, our strengths. Like I've gotten feedback on my podcast tons of times that I'm just going to not do because this is me. This is how I like to do it. And I believe the more I'm me, the higher the likelihood of success for me is.
You're going to attract the people you want.
Right.
Versus if I was buttoned up in a suit and tie like my dad.
We wouldn't be having this fun. Yeah.
No.
Right. Not going to happen. In fact, my wife gives me a hard time. I spoke at Digital Summit in Denver this last year, which was a big moment for me. I've spoken a lot in front of small business owners. This was my first time speaking to peers, and it was big. It was a big moment for me. And I wore my T-shirt and my hat because that's me. You know, my wife hates it. She's like,
Really?
put on a nice shirt. Well, she likes it, but she's like telling me to. But anyway, what I'm curious about is there's also then this other world that you live in with help and advisory and consulting and all of this stuff and these mastermind groups, which I think there's so much value there. My question is how do you balance those two ideas of being authentic, being who we are, and leaning into our own strengths, and advice and taking insights and things like that? Just kind of curious your take on it. And I didn't even think I'd go there.
I mean, I'm just who I am. I'm not going to change. And it's taken me a long time to figure it out. I really think it took me probably until 40. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then like every day I'm trying to learn something new. But I don't know, like on my calls, I'm like, if you get an email with a misspelling or bad grammar, that was me. It's not AI. Like I'm not trying to fake it. Or if I mess up on something, I'll call it out. Right? Like, I'm constantly making fun of my dyslexia or ADHD, right? Like, I'm like...
You have both?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've got severe ADHD. Luckily, I don't have dyslexia, but my wife does. Having both would be fun to be around.
You'll like this story. And a shout out to Michael Scott.
Did you see our The Office placard on your way in?
No, but
You
I have
to
a
see it when you
member
leave.
named Michael Scott.
Oh, okay. So, okay, got it.
Right? But it's kind it's kind of like an office thing. So we were at the ranch, and we broke off into a small group. So there was maybe 6 agency owners chatting, and it was all dudes on this one. I mean, we have 40% women, but just in this one meeting, it was like a couple dudes, and we all had ADHD. And so Mike went to Michael, like he's trying to solve a challenge that Michael's having. And he goes, so why do you do this? And he got really deep into it. So then Michael goes, he goes, well, I get distracted a lot. And like I'll get into pickleball and I'll get all the gear. And then I'll get into running. I'll get all the gear and the sunglasses and the shorts and the hat. Then I'll get into this. And he goes, and that's why I don't have a tattoo. Right. And like, it's just like, you have to be yourself. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's the coolest part. Like, and we just laugh about it. And so now I always try to, like, every conversation, like I have an internal joke with them. Like, how do I say, and that's why I don't have a tattoo. I do have a tattoo.
Right. But
right. Like, I'm like you just got to be yourself and have fun all the time. So I don't care what anybody else thinks. It would bother me sometimes. Like if I read stuff, I'll be like, oh, fucker. And then I'll be like, oh, short-term memory. I'm on
to the next. Yeah.
Right. Like I didn't even know, was it election 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was election day.
Right.
Like, cause like someone was like, how do you not know that? I was like, I don't watch the news. I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't care. Like, I'm just going to do what I do.
Living life. Yeah. It's so funny. I actually had a call just recently with somebody who was all very upset about the election, and I forgot that it had occurred. Yeah. And I don't mean to imply I'm uninformed. I'm not. I'm informed. Mm-hmm. But I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I'm trying to figure out the formula to be the happiest version of myself possible. Yeah. And it's interesting because, in order to do that, I've got to have a successful business. I've got to have my agency grow. All of that stuff is very, very true and very important. In fact, the majority of it. But then there's all this other, these other things that have to fall into place too. Yeah. So I'm curious though, because, there's an argument that would say you've got the benefit of hindsight. And,
How so?
Because you get to look back and see the formula that got you where you were with that perspective, like looking back.
But what got you there is not what's going to get you to the next place.
It's a very good point.
Right. But there is a framework.
How like
a small framework.
People credit sometimes like if somebody made it, sometimes they get the credit more than they deserve because they made it. Where like the other person who didn't make it maybe was just as capable or just as,
Most definitely.
So anyway.
Because there's a lot of luck that goes into it.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like you have to be in the right, like you have to be prepared. I was always prepared for the lucky parts.
Right. And that's one of my favorite things about agency ownership is that we are at any time one handshake away from a life-changing opportunity.
All the time.
It's the coolest thing. Anyway, all of that to say, you talked about this like hiring, delegating, leaning into what you're good at moment. For a lot of people, that's a very scary chapter because you're sort of relinquishing some control. You've built this agency from your expertise and whatever. Talk me through what that felt like, and then follow up to that would be your advice to agency owners right now that are struggling with that chapter of like letting go, hiring, getting some help. Because I think a lot of agency owners are still in the growth stagnates because they're still doing it all type of thing. So 2-part question. What did it feel like when you did it the first time? And what would be your advice to agency owners now that are nervous to, to make those hires?
I'm not going to lie. It's scary as hell, right? It's kind of like, and I tell people, they're like, well, I delegated to this one employee and they totally screwed it. And I lost 50,000 or 100,000, almost lost my business from it. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, have you ever got food poisoning before? Yeah. From where? Applebee's. I hate Applebee's. I got food poisoning from it twice.
Today's podcast
sponsored by shit Applebee's. And so I'm like, well, did you get food poisoning from the restaurant? Yep. Do you still eat out? Yeah. You just don't go to that one restaurant anymore. So you just hired the wrong person. Or maybe it was your fault. Maybe you didn't give them the direction or the freedom to make choices. And they were just so scared. Like maybe you were that hover parent or that hover boss, right? The only thing I learned this after I sold the agency. I didn't have to worry about motivating the right person. I always had to worry about demotivating them.
You'd rather hold someone back than push them forward.
Correct. Right. So like when we were bought and I had a new role, I was like, oh man, we can do even more. Right. And then I went to them and they're like, yeah, and they demotivated me. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm checked out.
Right.
I'm going to go do something else. Right. And so, what was the question?
Well, we're getting there. How it felt, that moment of delegation and advice to people who are struggling with it.
Yeah. So you have to figure out where you're going and just give that to the right people. But you also have to ask, do you have the right people? Like a good exercise I tell everyone to do, regardless if you're an agency owner or not, if you made a list of all your employees, is there any employee or team member that if they came in and quit tomorrow that you would be happy? Probably like 2 or 3, right? You'd be like, hell yeah. Jackson. Okay, you should fire Jackson tomorrow. Why don't you fire Jackson? Well, in the short term, that will require me to do a lot more work. But he's killing you for the long term.
Right.
Right? It's kind of like, I want to go on a diet and I want to feel better, but I'm going to eat this cookie right now for short-term gain versus long-term health.
Have you ever heard the pick your hard concept? It's choose your hard. Being fit is hard. Being fat is hard. Staying married is hard. Getting divorced is hard. Spending all your money is hard. Being disciplined, pick your hard. Because and I think so. Keeping the employee is hard. Firing the employee is hard. It's like what do you pick your heart. Welcome to it. And I've loved that because if we just know that there isn't an easy path, like it's going to be hard, no matter what. Welcome to life. Yeah. Right. It's hard. Now we get to choose our hard. Yeah. Like which way we're going to go. Sort of an empowering mindset to have, because then it helps you with some of those conversations of. I love that exercise of if somebody came and quit today. Would you have that, like, you worded it as be happy,
would you smile?
Would you be a little relieved? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Be like, yeah, like that. If Julie laughed, I'd be so happy.
Right. Yeah, and then when you word it like that, it's like, well, then Julie should leave. What a no-brainer.
And
so the concept, so the takeaway from that is that the concept of freeing yourself from your agency, delegating, putting people in place is tried and true. The variable is who's in place and how you've empowered them.
It's who is in the right seat. That's really it. And do they have the same values you do? In the very beginning, I remember hiring the first person. I was interviewing them in a Slosky's Deli. And I'm like selling them on we'll do some really cool stuff. And I'm selling them versus them selling me.
Right.
I never really asked them, what do you like doing? When I used to do interviews, and sometimes I'll still do this, at the agency, I would show up in full race gear for an interview. I want to see what they do.
Right.
Or I'd show up in a tutu over my jeans and this shirt just to see what they're going to do, especially if they're a social media manager, right? I want them to take a picture of me.
Right.
And post it.
Right.
What are they going to do versus what kind of freak are you? Right. And so I'm constantly asking kind of core value questions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have our core values are being resourceful, sharing wins, sharing failures, right? A team effort, that kind of stuff. So I want to know that, but I'm not going to ask you, do you check the box for this core value?
Right.
I'm going to ask questions, a conversation,
Be
what do
smart
you like
about
to
it.
do? What do you like to do for fun? Oh man, I'm an endurance athlete, right? I love to hire athletes, right? Because they're competitive. That's a big core value too, right? Or it's just, you can relate it to all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, I'm here where I'm at because I was lucky. I hired the right people. I was resourceful. I had a short-term memory. That's really it.
Yeah, there's some themes though that are, I think, powerful takeaways, and one of them is valuing yourself. Because you had mentioned now twice, whether it's a client or an employee, why am I selling them?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I love that idea of, and I think the trick for most agency owners, most business owners, whether you're an agency or not, is having the courage to I especially in the early days, I had some struggles with who needs who more. The employee, or, do I need the employee more than they need me, or do they need me more than I need them? And a lot of it's been my insecurities, both with clients and employees, where I'm I think that I need them more than they need me, because I'm insecure, or was. And so I would let these things drag on.
We're all insecure.
Oh, for sure. And if you're not, you're lying.
Yes.
Let's just be real here. But it was fascinating. And again, lessons learned 7, 8, 9 times for me. But, over a long time horizon, things left like they should have anyway. Mm-hmm. It was more painful than it needed to be because it took longer than it needed to. And guess what? I'm fine. I didn't need them more than they needed me. Yeah. And it's been such a fascinating learning experience for me. And I love how you've worded it, though, to apply that both in our it's the same concept in different applications with an employee or a client. Is there clarity? Are they aligned with our North Star? Because if not, they're going to occupy all this time and energy that then's going to detract from
they're going to fight
the vision and the mission. Yeah. So, but my takeaway of that is that it comes down to valuing ourselves.
Well, once you have that clarity and you understand who you are and what your agency believes in or your business believes in, then you just judge them based on that.
Right.
Right? Do they have that value? All of my best team members, they weren't my twin. That would be a complete train wreck.
If there were two of me, this would be.
We would never get anything done.
I can't think of anything worse.
My team makes fun of me so much. I'm rabbit, squirrel, red, all over the place. And they're one of the things that stop, start, continue. One of them was Jason, you need to do 24-hour thought. Because I execute so fast.
You and me both.
I'm I have this idea. We'll go do it.
And I want it done yesterday. I wanted it perfectly. And who's going to, I'm going to start it,
And they told me I got an 84. Because I do that question every time at the ranch, and we did it again this year. And then the other members were well, how'd Jason do?
84 out of 100?
84 out of 100. I was
hey, that's not bad. They're probably probably lying a little bit, but that's not bad.
I probably a C.
Right.
Because I'm hey, I got this idea.
Right.
Literally, I changed the company name and the website and all the branding. When I was at my mother-in-law's over Christmas when I was bored, I was the company can't be called Jason Swenk anymore. It's
boom. Yeah.
And they come back from Christmas break and everything's changed. They're like, it's better, but this is stupid.
But what happened? We had a process, It's so funny. So I'm curious, huge exit. You stayed on as the, as the executive, and then that company went public. So I'm not asking for anything, but I'm imagining a second exit.
We had two exits. So yeah, that was cool. I was just glad because I was ready to get out of there.
It's amazing. So my question is sitting in front of me, somebody who's had two successful exits. I would assume, financially we're set up, all these things have come into place. Why in the world then are you still doing a podcast a week, putting together, agency masterminds, putting all the work, time and energy into these meetups and these groups and, the consulting and all of that stuff? How come you're not sitting on a beach somewhere?
Because it's boring as shit. Remember I told you I went to the Tony Robbins event, right?
You walked on coals. That's what happened.
I was depressed, and I realized that I didn't have that significance or that contribution, that team, right? I wanted to put together a team that, like, I missed that. Like, once I sold and I was sitting on the beach and everyone else is working, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, there's only so much tennis, like I can get a tennis ball thrower or whatever we call it. I can't remember, but like, there's only so much you can do by yourself. Like we need to be with other people. And so and it took me a couple years to find this, right? I designed an iPhone app that would take pictures of everything that you ate, and it would give you a visualization on how you feel over the picture. And I hated it. I was like, this is the dumbest thing. And that was a money decision because Instagram sold for $1 billion. I was like, well, these jackasses can create a picture app. I can actually do it one better and let people know what foods are associated to bad feelings.
How you're feeling,
right?
yeah.
Like if I ate, and it really worked, but I hated it, right? Like if I saw like my grid, right? Like your Instagram grid, right? It was called Goalvator. And I would see like chocolate and all these brown foods. Well, fuck yeah, I'm not going to have any energy, right? Like
Right.
If I'm going to go try to do a triathlon, like I'm going to get my ass kicked.
Not happening,
right?
yeah.
But if I have like bananas and colorful things, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. I feel a lot better, right? But I hated it. And I was like, I was just searching for a team. I was searching for community. I was searching for significance. And so when I started helping out those agency owners for free, my wife's like, why don't you go do that? I'm like, oh. And I started doing it. I was like, man, this is fun. And then I started adding to the team, and that was fun, just solving challenges. Like a member would leave, and I'd be like, oh, they don't like me anymore, right? Or a client would leave. You're like, I'm losing it. But then like we'd just fight through it and be like, all right, well, that's just a natural progression. Like, let's upgrade.
Right.
And do it. And then that just gave me spark. Like last year, I had someone with a big number come to me to buy this company. I was like, no, I'm having too much fun.
Not doing it. Yeah. I love it. No, it's cool because you can tell you're doing it because you're passionate about it and that, it's not a money decision right now, which is awesome. Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for giving me some time. Thanks for, having a meeting on a Monday, which I know is a rule breaker, but I really appreciate it.
That's all right.
And, thanks for being a good neighbor, but also thanks for being a good representation of the agency space and for connecting people, for building community, for spreading good information and good energy and all of that stuff. Cool. I've got it's tradition here. I give out my Inspire by Example shirts.
Oh, sweet.
So I got one for you because
Awesome.
you're inspiring by example.
I need the extra small.
Yeah, that's the schmedium for you. No, but seriously, thank you so much because you're making an impact, and it is so awesome to get to sit and pick your brain. It's like I said early on, I've been aware of you forever. Once I realized you were a neighbor, I'm like, okay, I gotta shoot my shot. So thanks for letting me do it. Thanks for humoring me, and can't wait to stay in touch.
Yeah, man.
So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome.